Just days after President Trump announced that he'd called off military strikes on Iran, with only minutes to spare, came a warning that Washington was not backing down. National Security Advisor John Bolton, who was on a visit to Israel, said Iran's nuclear ambitions and its involvement in many conflicts around the region represented a threat to international peace.
Neither Iran nor any other hostile actor should mistake U.S. prudence and discretion for weakness. No one has granted them a hunting license in the Middle East.
But although the president cancelled the airstrikes, reliable reports say the US launched a cyber attack on Iran designed to cripple its computer systems. Such an attack would target Iran's defence capabilities, such as its missile sites, which succeeded in bringing down the drone which the Iranians have been proudly displaying. Military sources say a cyber attack would have been prepared to coincide with the airstrikes, and once they had been called off, they may have decided to implement the cyber attacks anyway as a warning. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani today accused the United States of having an interventionist military presence, which he said was responsible for the Middle East's problems.
I would say what Iran is seeking here in order to come to the negotiating table is a dialing back of U.S. sanctions. And this is where there's distance between both sides. If the U.S. keeps putting more and more sanctions on Tehran, it's hard to see how the end game is going to come to fruition at a pace that we need it to.
British Foreign Office Minister Andrew Morrison had meetings in Tehran today with senior Iranian government officials. In a statement, he said, "I reiterated the UK's assessment that Iran almost certainly bears responsibility for recent attacks on tankers in the Gulf of Oman. Such activity, which carries a high risk of miscalculation, needs to stop to allow for immediate de-escalation of rising tensions. And I was clear that the UK will continue to play its full part alongside international partners to find diplomatic solutions to reduce the current tensions."
There are high-level representatives traveling to Tehran and impressing upon Iran to stay in the nuclear agreement and to keep tensions at a minimum. At the same time, without a bigger effort on behalf of Europe, they risk to make themselves irrelevant.
President Trump's approach to Iran is in sharp contrast to his policy on North Korea, who revealed today that Kim Jong-un had received a personal letter from the US president. The Korean leader described it as excellent. Tomorrow, President Trump, who's on record as saying that lifting economic restraints would make Iran great again, is expected to announce a range of new sanctions against the regime in Tehran.
Well, joining me now is Dr. Lina Khatib, who is head of the Middle East programme at Chatham House. And in a moment, from his constituency in Bedfordshire, the MP and former Foreign Office Minister, Alistair Burt. Lina Khatib, can I turn to you first of all? We've heard President Trump saying things like, let's make Iran great again. He says he wants to be Iran's best friend. He also says Iran faces the possibility of obliteration were there to be a war. What are we to make of these contradictory statements?
Well, we've heard this before, haven't we? I mean, in the report, North Korea was mentioned, and I would say if we roll back, we will see a similar pattern. For me, this is classic President Trump. He issues contradictory statements. He seems to change his mind between one day and another. But the aim of this is, I think, to confuse the other side and to kind of keep them on edge, because this, I think, gives him the upper hand in the negotiations that may happen in the future. And of course, we all hope that this will result in negotiations and not conflict.
I mean, you mentioned North Korea there. We saw Kim with his letter that he describes as excellent from President Trump. It seems that President Trump is taking a slightly different approach to North Korea as he is to Iran. Why would that be?
But in the beginning, he didn't. In the beginning, he was very hawkish on North Korea. And we have to remember John Bolton was also very hawkish on North Korea, just as he is now hawkish on Iran. I feel that President Trump is very aware of these contradictions within his administration and feels that they are to his benefit. So I wouldn't put it beyond the US and Iran eventually to reach a stage of exchanging letters like we're seeing with President Trump and North Korea. But we have to also remember that this change of heart, or at least tactics, vis-à-vis North Korea, until now have not resulted in any actual peace deal. And therefore, we shouldn't think that this is going to be resolved anytime soon with Iran.
So Donald Trump is under pressure from those within his administration, John Bolton perhaps?
Well, he is under pressure because of the election. And this is what gives Iran leverage, because they know that entering war is not going to work in President Trump's favour when he's trying to be re-elected.
OK, thanks very much, Lena. If I can just turn to you, please, Alistair Burt. Having been a minister in this situation yourself, what sort of words, what sort of conversation would a British foreign minister be having in Tehran today?
Andrew Morrison will be warmly received in Iran. It's a very processed conversation. Andrew Morrison will have things he wants to deliver on behalf of the United Kingdom. Iran will listen and counter with issues their way. The truth is that there is fault on all sides here. Iran plainly engages in activity in the region which worries other regional countries. And also, they find themselves in the right in relation to having signed a deal which confined their nuclear activities, which the United States has walked away from. So both sides have things that they can put to each other, but until one moves first in a conciliatory way to try and de-escalate, then we have the sort of problems that we're seeing today. If the President of the United States wants to make Iran great again economically, he could actually return to the JCPOA, which confines the nuclear issue for Iran and stops their nuclear progress, and make some moves on economic matters, and then use that as the base for the wider negotiations to counter things that Iran is doing.
I mean, we're hearing talk of sanctions being launched tomorrow, further sanctions. Do you think that's wise? What sort of impact is that going to have?
I don't really, because ever since the United States came out of JCPOA and applied the sanctions, we've not seen any change in Iran's behaviour. I'm well aware the United States wants to follow a policy of maximum pressure, and the United Kingdom can well understand the pressures on other states. I think it's very much worth remembering at the moment that this isn't all about Iran and the USA. If anything happens between them, it won't be the United States that gets affected so much. It will be the other states in the region that might find themselves involved in a war. The wise words of Dr. Anwar Gargash today, the Minister of State in the UAE, who said these tensions are long-standing, they need diplomatic and political resolution, and the regional actors must have a strong voice, should be remembered. This isn't all about the West and Iran. It is about Iran's behaviour in the region, but the need for the region to solve this issue and stop the moves towards conflict.
Do you think there's enough trust between countries in the region, though? I mean, Saudi Arabia has been seen as taking a role where it escalates tensions with Iran.
No, there's no trust between nations, but that's not unusual. And as Hillary Clinton once said, you know, don't make peace deals with your friends. And the whole point of the JCPOA, and having sat in on some of those conversations, both sides say the merit of JCPOA, the nuclear deal, was that it was made between people who didn't trust each other, but there was sufficient verification involved to make sure it worked. So the fact that people don't trust each other in the region, and Saudi Arabia and the UAE have to face attacks from Yemen by the Houthis from Iranian-sourced materials, means that they've got a say in this as well.
Mr. Burt, if I can just very quickly ask you, on Boris Johnson, do you think he owes an explanation for what happened around this police visit?
No, thank you for asking. You've asked me to talk about Iran. Others have spoken about Boris Johnson today, as Liam Fox has done. Boris Johnson will answer for his own actions, but it's not part of an interview in relation to Iran.
Thanks very much for joining us, Mr. Burt. And thanks also to Lena.